This morning, we're one-on-one with former New York Governor David Paterson. We'll get his take on the state of the state almost a decade after he left Albany. Plus, the lure of the summer sun could envelop you under a dark cloud of trouble, skin cancer. Our doctors will tell you the warning signs and tell you about the revolutionary new way to diagnose melanoma.
Now, from 42nd and 2nd, this is Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Good morning. New York was in the throes of political upheaval back in 2008 when Governor Eliot Spitzer got caught up in a scandal patronizing prostitutes. It forced him to resign, thus catapulting his lieutenant governor to the highest position in the state. David Paterson became the 55th governor of New York, the first African-American and first blind governor of New York. He served the remaining 3 years of Spitzer's term. In the end, he chose not to run for the office on his own, leading to the ascension of Governor Andrew Cuomo. Now, since leaving office, Paterson served as a radio talk show host, and he's been appointed as chairman of the New York State Democratic Party. Currently, he is with the Stifel Investment Services firm. Governor, it's been a few years. Good to have you back here.
It's great to be here, Marvin.
You know, and there's one thing I missed because you're in store for congratulations because it was just a couple of weeks ago. You were celebrating your 65th birthday, but you also did something special. You popped a question and you got engaged. Let's take a look at the picture here of your 65th birthday, and you're engaged to Mary Sliwa, and you really surprised her.
Took a big chance. There were about 150 people there. John Katzimatidis had a birthday party for me, and if she said no, the world would have heard about it. But fortunately for me, she said yes.
Well, congratulations to both of you. All right, let's look back to that day back in 2008 when you learned that Spitzer was gone and you were going to be the governor of the state of New York, and you were petrified. And if I read correctly, you called your former wife and you said, "I think I'm going to kill myself." Is that true?
It's not true. Cindy Adams wrote it, so you should have known it wasn't true in the first place. I called my former wife to tell her that it looked like Spitzer was going to resign in an hour. He did not. He resigned 2 days later. And she said to me, I can't think of anyone I would want as a citizen in the chair where you are right now. And I didn't feel exactly that way at the moment, but duty calls and you serve.
And you served for 3 years. And looking back at it, why did you choose not to run on your own for a full term?
Well, during the time that I was in office, I closed about $40 billion in 33 months. That is the most any governor has ever had to cut the budget by 3 times. So when you are the one who is creating the financial discipline in a state that had been kicking the can down the road for 25 years, you're not going to make too many friends. And I realized that politically, I was getting hit from both sides. The Republicans didn't like the taxes. The Democrats didn't like the cuts. So I saw it as a mission that I had to accomplish and then move on, because politically it would be hard to run for re-election at the time. And with the Attorney General, Andrew Cuomo, interested in becoming governor, I knew that we would be well served, as we have been by him for the last 9 years.
Now, he just announced this past week that he will seek a 4th term. That's kind of unprecedented here in New York State.
Well, it's not, because Governor Nelson Rockefeller served 4 terms. Governor Andrew Cuomo, his dad, ran for a 4th term and lost. And Governor Pataki wanted to run for a 4th term, but had some illness issues that got in the way. And I think that the good thing about having Governor Cuomo run for 4th term is, should President Trump be reelected in 2024, that would make the presidential seat open. And I can't think of anyone who'd be better for this country right now than Governor Andrew Cuomo.
So you think that's part of the motivation there, to seek a 4th term and be available in 2024 for Andrew Cuomo?
I don't know if that's his immediate thought. I think he just wants to finish some of the projects that he started. But in 2024, if the president is reelected, it would then become an open seat. And it's a lot easier to run for than run with 23 other people, even though he'd be with Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. He'd be one of the top 3. but I think that he would be really a great choice in 5 years.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Governor Paterson, sitting on the sidelines for the past decade now, how do you view the state of the state? Is it better or is it worse than when you were there?
Well, if you have a conservative leaning politically, you would have to respect what the state has done under Governor Cuomo by adding a new tier to the pension system to reduce the cost to taxpayers for paying pensions. In addition, he lowered property taxes around the state, which was the number one issue of upstaters and the Republican Party. Now, if you're a Democrat, you have to really be happy. $15 minimum wage, family sick leave, passed same-sex marriage before it became approved by the Supreme Court. So I would say this is a governor who has been has an appeal to both sides of the aisle and speaks out on the national issues. And
so you have a positive view of the state of the state. I have to ask you this. Had you stayed in office, had you had 1 or 2 terms, what would have been on your agenda? What would have been the foremost thing you would have sought for the state of New York?
Well, at the time that I left office, we had a vote on same-sex marriage and it lost. And I thought we were right at the precipice. So I would have wanted to finish that. I changed the whole structure of minority and women's business enterprises in the state. Women and minorities were getting 5% of the state's procurement, and I extended that to business, insurance, and the sales of securities and bonds. But I didn't feel that I did enough for disabled people who are trying to work in other areas, vendors. I would like to have done a better job in that area.
Okay, I want to take a break. I want to come back. I want to talk about some other things, talk about the cloud of corruption that was really hanging so heavily back then. And, there are attempts to clean it up and change the laws, reforms. I want to talk more about that with former Governor David Paterson when Pix 11 News Close-Up continues. Stay with us. Back now with former New York Governor David Paterson. When you left Albany, there was such a dark cloud of corruption hanging over the legislature. We've had so many people indicted, convicted. You had Shelley Silver, the leader of the Assembly, you had Dean Skelos, the leader of the Senate. Efforts have been made to clean it up. How do you finally rid this corruptive climate?
Yeah, I served with 5 leaders, 4 majority leaders and a speaker. All 5 got indicted, all 5 got convicted. 1 conviction was overturned correctly in the case of former Majority Leader Joe Bruno. But I think that the issues of corruption really relate to sometimes people serving in positions for too long. In other words, not enough of a change. And secondly, you have basically ordinary people get elected to public office and they're around billions of dollars being handed out, and I think it's tempting. They tried to extend some of these investigations to me, but the only thing I was ever guilty of was going to a Yankees World Series game as the governor of the state and not paying for the ticket. That, by the way, was overturned by the legislature later. And so next to what some of these other people did, I think my Yankees tickets are looking pretty good.
Did the Yankees win?
No, they lost 6-1 to the Philadelphia Phillies.
So how do you finally clear that climate? I know under Governor Cuomo there have been many reforms. What is the final solution to rid this state of that dark cloud?
I think that you can't legislate morality, Marvin. It's just the people who are there. And the legislators tend to elect as their leaders people who are serving their interests more than the public interest. And, there's still been some scandals in the area because people get too close to power and too close to money, and human beings have shown time and time again that we can't handle either particularly well.
Something in New York. New York has really been in the forefront of abortion reforms and strengthening the protection for women. I mean, the strongest laws, I think, just this year, they strengthened it, what they've had in the past 50 years, and at a time when so many states are weakening those laws. What do you think of that?
I think that these states, like Missouri and Alabama and Mississippi, that are undercutting the law set by the United States Supreme Court should hang their heads in shame. The fact is that this is the law of the land, and undoing the law on for whatever reason is, I think, antithetical to what we stand for in our country. These cases that are coming before the Supreme Court in the United States right now will be decided. And whichever way they are decided, we have to live by that law. Now, right now, it looks like there could be enough judges on the court to overturn Roe v. Wade, but we'll wait and see. I think the idea of using the institutions to shut down the rights of women to control what happens to their own bodies is deplorable.
So you see this heading for a showdown in the Supreme Court, ultimately.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. The state of New York has been so heavily burdened by homelessness. We have 60,000 people in shelters every night here in New York City. It was a problem back when you were in office. Do you have some thoughts about how we deal with this? How can we finally get these people into affordable housing?
I think we have to go back to the affordable housing plan, and even the situations where we used to take buildings and create small apartments for people to live in that were relatively inexpensive, and to some degree, it would cost less money than putting the 50 to 60,000 people who are in shelters right now. It is probably the biggest problem attacking our city, and we're now seeing homelessness in the streets that was reminiscent of what we saw in the 80s.
Something I know that you're working on is a kind of a pet project right now. We just celebrated and observed Memorial Day, remembering our heroes. But you want to go back and do a different observation of Memorial Day, going back to the time of the Civil War. Tell us about that.
Well, the Civil War ended in April of 1965, but in Charleston, South Carolina, 257 members of the 21st Negro Infantry Division were held at a jockey club and racetrack, and because of malnutrition and violence, all 257 of these soldiers died. And the newly freed black people that lived in Charleston created a march on May 1st, 1865, which they called the First Decoration Day and the tribute to the martyrs of the racetrack. That is actually the first Memorial Day. There was several held in black communities during that time. Finally, the Confederates started to adopt the Memorial Day, and they honored the white soldiers from the North and South, no blacks, because they were trying to get their states readmitted to the Union. They had seceded some years before. So what I would like to do is to hold a Memorial Day in honor of the original Memorial Day, and I don't see it as a black event. I'd like all New Yorkers to come to it. We're going to do it next year.
So incorporate this as part of the observance of...
Yes, because these people who fought for our country in a war were left out of history, even though they founded the tradition that we all observe. I'm not trying to take it away from anyone else. I love Memorial Day. I just want to expand it to all the people who deserve praise after 150 years.
Now, but I have to ask you one thing before we end this. Mayor de Blasio is running for president. He's a fellow Democrat. What do you think?
He is? That's shocking. Well, Mayor de Blasio, I think, speaks to a lot of the issues that Democrats around the country believe in. But at the same time, he's gotten unusual criticism from the progressive wing at the party at the same time for what appears to be problems implementing some of this policy into the changing the quality of life of people. And he's going to have to overcome that struggle before he can really be listened to on a national stage. I think he's got some great ideas, but I think he had a lot of trouble implementing them.
Well, former Governor David Paterson, it's always good to have you on the program, and thanks so much for coming in today, and always appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Marvin. Good to see you again.
Enjoy your summer. We're going to take a break. Come back. We'll talk to you about one of the hazards of summer, the sun, too much of it. We'll be right back. May has been Melanoma Awareness Month, so we thought it's a good idea right now to alert you to the hazards of sun worshiping. An estimated 5 million people a year are diagnosed with skin cancer, more than 93,000 with melanoma. That is the most deadly form of skin cancer, and it claims an estimated 10,000 lives a year just in the United States. Now, there was a time when some of us, like me, worshiped the sun with reflectors like that, the suntan oil, and oh, what great tans, only to learn many years later the costly effects of that marvelous tan. Basal cell, squamous cell, and melanoma cancers resulting from the sun exposure. To help you not make the same mistakes I did years ago, pleased to be joined now by Dr. Bruce Robinson, a specialist in adult and pediatric dermatology and national spokesman for the American Academy of Dermatology. And Dr. Robert Bard, he's a cancer imaging specialist who focuses on advanced 3D sonography to detect cancers, including breast, thyroid, prostate, skin, and melanomas. His technology could make painful Mohs surgeries. We'll explain that. Mohs surgeries to remove cancers obsolete. And they both have practices right here in Manhattan. Good to have you with us. Dr. Robinson, would you begin? What are the warning signs of skin problems from exposure to the sun?
The warning signs are the A, B, C, D, E's, we call them, especially when it comes to melanoma. So the A stands for asymmetry, moles that are not equally distributed. B, borders that are not nice and round. C, the color should be one color, not multicolored. The diameter, about the size of a pencil eraser, 6 millimeters. And E, any mole that is either rapidly growing or becomes symptomatic in any way, itch, hurts, or burns, Marvin.
And if you have a question, go see a doctor.
Absolutely. See your local dermatologist.
All right, we see all these skin blocks, you got SPF 20, 30, up to 80 now. Is there a safe one?
We say in the practice of dermatology that we ask our patients to practice safe sun. And by doing that, you want to use at least an SPF of 30 or greater.
Does it make any difference if you go up to 80, or is it just
diminishing returns after 30?
And what should you look for in there? I mean, I know there are different substances that you have in these different skin products.
Of importance is the mineral-based sunscreens, ones that have zinc oxide particularly, because that is a reflective surface that works right away. Nobody's allergic to zinc as we consume it in our diet, and still give us one of the broadest spectrums of coverage. You also want an additive that is a chemical sunscreen that covers a little bit more of the UVA where the mineral sunscreen falls off.
I know we all find our excuses when we get exposed to the sun, but are some of us more vulnerable than others?
Absolutely. So people with light hair, light eyes, very light skin are more susceptible, but nobody's immune from getting skin cancer.
All right, so once the damage is done, then we go to the skin detective, Dr. Bard here. He's got all his little gadgets in his office there in Manhattan. And how do you detect this? I mean, tell us about that.
We use safe, non-invasive ultrasound imaging, the same way you see the face of a baby inside the mother's uterus. You can see the skin cancer, you can see the depth of it, and you can see the shape. In other words, you get the margins with the medical imaging technologies we have, which show, again, both how deep it is, which is important for treatment, and also with the newer technologies, you can see the margins, which can make surgical excision less wide, and of course reduce the scarring.
Now, you can detect very graphically a melanoma, and I think we have video. Why don't you describe what we're seeing as Rowie, as we take a look at that video? A melanoma is formed. There we go.
This is an interesting example showing the white line where the melanoma is on top, and that's where you would do a shave biopsy. But below that biopsy, that dark area, happens to be the fact that the melanoma has already metastasized. So in this case, it is smarter to do imaging first to make sure the tumor hasn't spread before you start cutting. And we can do this with many cancers. For example, with breast cancer or thyroid cancer, we can see if it's spread to the lymph nodes. As we saw with the previous patient, we can tell them it hasn't spread to the lymph nodes.
Let's talk about this Mohs surgery I mentioned earlier. This is a procedure whereby a surgeon goes in once an individual has been diagnosed with cancer, with a skin cancer. They go in and these margins you talk about, they take out a little portion at a time until they determine they've cleared that section of any cancerous cells. But you can see this without the necessity of doing any surgical procedure.
Yes, with the 3D ultrasound imaging we have, not only can we see the depth of the tumor, which is important because some basal cell cancers can be treated easily with radiation and disappear, especially in older people who don't want scarring. But with the new laser optical technologies, you see the margins as well. So you actually get the depth and the borders of a tumor, which will reduce the surgical time.
I think we have a little thing there we could show where you can see the epidermis, you see the skin. If we can bring that up for a moment. It is kind of dark. No, this is what Dr. Robinson was talking about, the different forms
Yes, sir.
of melanoma. But there's another graphic in here, I think a video graphic, which shows too where the bone is located there in that one. And
Yes, the bottom line, the white line in the middle of the screen is the bone, and on top of that there's a black area which happens to be the margins of the cancer. So in one 3-minute ultrasound imaging session, you see the black tumor on top and then the thin spread out tentacles of the tumor are the margins. So you get everything with one 3D image setting.
And this eliminates the necessity of the in-depth surgical procedure.
The surgeon knows how deep he has to go.
Precisely where to go. He doesn't have to probe any
Exactly.
deeper. Okay, that could be a very painful procedure. What guidance do you offer? I hear we're coming into the summer and we're all looking forward to coming out of winter and we're all looking, no sun reflectors any longer. I've thrown that away. What's your advice and guidance to people?
I love people to practice safe sun strategy. And that really incorporates using the proper sunscreen, as you mentioned. But in addition, to make sure we use sun protective clothing where possible, a hat with a 4-inch brim, UVA, UVB coverage sunglasses. Make sure you do a self-examination once a month, especially women when they do their breast exam. Grab your partner, they check you, you check them. Great for couples. And then perhaps you make sure that you get your yearly skin exam with your local dermatologist.
And Dr. Bart can do this with the 3D sonography imaging.
Yes, there are two things that dermatologists are not good at seeing, and that's tumor regression. Specifically, in basal cell cancers, there are white dots, and the more of these white dots, the more aggressive it is. This happens to be in a textbook that's coming out that I wrote for the end of December. Secondly, in melanoma, even more importantly, if you have this many tumor vessels going into a melanoma, it's bad. If you have this many, it's less aggressive. And of course, if you treat it, if the tumor vessels go from this to this, you better change treatment.
Also, Dr. Robinson works very important too with children, particularly babies. You have to have extra protection for them.
Yeah, so we say that babies should be protected from the get-go. Try to keep them out of the sun completely, but if you can't do that, at least use a mineral-based sunscreen and really try to keep your activities in the shade and really try to avoid the sun between the hours of 10 and 2.
Okay, Dr. Bruce Robinson, Dr. Robert Bard, thank you very much. And advice that I've taken over the years, we all love the sun, but just be more conscious of how much you're getting of that. So thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you, Mark.
And that'll do it for our program for this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website at pix11.com/newscloseup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.